Hey, what's up out there? I'm Howler Mouse, and this is the esteemed PonAdidas here. We were just, we've started 6 minutes late because we were just chatting away, and I think it was more my fault than anybody, so I'll take the hit. And we've already got people here, Pon.
Awesome.
Plug your stuff, man. You want to say hello to everybody or anything?
No, I'm good. I'm not really a plugger. The people who love my channel, they love it. It is what it is. But if you like 25 great quotes, I have a bunch of them in a playlist. That's how I kind of got my subscribers. And occasionally I do pop on a comic show or two.
Right on, right on. And I feel pretty good, Pon, that I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot. I don't think this will be your last time on here, so
That
glad to have
sounds
you
good.
on. We
Thank
got
you.
we got John here ready for us to go. We got Zero saying hello. The great Palo watching NASCAR while he waits for this. Yeah, Palo's like I said, he's our international man of mystery with comics, and I live real close to two NASCAR racetracks, which blows my mind. And we got Afro SF here. Greetings. I still say without Deathmate, we couldn't have had Age of Apocalypse or Flashpoint. They're all the same story.
Yes, that
I
is
was,
correct.
that's one of the things I was pointing out when we were talking before the show was definitely the Flashpoint here. And I did mention Deathmate for a different reason, though. And John Jones is here, right? All right. So let's talk about this, man. So hold up what you showed me there with how you read Age of Apocalypse.
So recently on the reread, I have the Age of Apocalypse Omnibus. And it actually does a nice job of mapping the book
Mhm.
so that you can actually read it in the order it came out. In the order I guess you're technically supposed to read, but you could read it in other orders. But if you read it like this, you can get the whole story chronologically. So that's what I've been reading. But I also, and the reason I'm here, is I read this as it came out on the stands in 1995 when I was 15.
Right
And I
on.
gotta say, it's a little different reading it at 45 than when you were 15. Some of the things you notice.
Yeah. 30th anniversary of this. I'm one of the people that, sort of around there. I was there when, after 17 years, Chris Claremont was gone. And
Yeah,
I didn't really jump on this when it first came out. It started out with the Alpha issue, Joe Mandera cover. This was all over the place. The Omega cover, I think I did get this, the last one. So this book ends it. They had a few little one shots and two shots here. Talk about what's going on there. We'll go over what it is real quick in '94. And then they replaced all of the X-Men books for 4 months in this alternate timeline, which I think they've retconned into being its own reality since then, of where Legion, Xavier's son, went back in time to kill Magneto, and he accidentally kills his father, which end result changes time and causes Apocalypse to resurface 10 years before and pretty much take over America and certain parts of the world. And Yeah, we'll just kind of leave it right there. And that's 1995. so,
yeah,
so let your eyes uncross because, like, I think one of the greatest things ever has been in movies was having Austin Powers explain time paradox when he was doing a time paradox in his movie, and you just kind of let it go. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I have seen people say this is one of their favorite crossovers, yet I've never seen them even own an issue. I don't know if it's nostalgia, like what you're talking about, like they were younger also and stuff back then. But I think people need to know what the wasteland of the '90s were at comics at the time. What do you remember? Because I loved your history of collecting that you told me right before this. What do you
Well,
remember the '90s there? Because you
everything
were on.
was everything was extreme, and everything was we got to change everything. Let's kill Superman. Let's break Batman's back. Let's kill all the Green Lanterns. It was a time of change.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, what I think sets up the landscape, this is what makes Age of Apocalypse of that era and things that led up to it, was basically you had some records set by Jim Lee with X-Men #1 and Chris Claremont. Todd McFarlane set a record with Spider-Man #1. X-Force #1 came out. Rob Liefeld, three records, three comics selling over a million issues apiece. And all of a sudden, it was like Marvel, the way I remember it, all of a sudden it went from creators and Chris Claremont in the writers and things like that, and superstar artists, where it really went into the artists pushing the books, and it led to all of a sudden Chris Claremont leaving the X-Men after 17 years. Okay. At that time, we ended up having Image set up. All those artists ended up leaving and, wanting to have the money, have their creations owned and all that stuff. And then we ended up having everybody was creating a universe, and all these companies were coming out. Valiant was right there at the front and center. Ultra Malibu Comics came out with Image first, and then Image got out of there, and we got the Ultraverse. All sorts of studios, right? And at a one and Valiant led to Defiant Comics and Broadway Comics, and all the stuff was going on. And they started having stunts because of all the competition that was going on. And that's what we were talking about, the crossovers and the big events that were going on to get sales. They finally killed Superman for real, right? And
Yeah.
that's what were you remembering about that one? Because this is all going to lead to Age of Apocalypse, folks. Don't
Right.
worry. Yeah.
So when the Death of Superman event happened, it was a 5-issue event, which then led into World Without a Superman event, which was like 9 issues or something. And then as soon as that event ended, we get boom, 4 number 1s with 4 Supermen.
Yeah.
And you're following all these. It's like you're following these 4 issues now, following the 4 different Supermen. And I always felt like the Age of Apocalypse took a page out of their book with they had the 4-issue Legion quest to start it.
Yeah.
And then they had 1 issue X-Men Alpha #1, and that was like the big lead into the universe. Here's how all the pieces played out. And then you followed into all the different books. We're now at new #1s with different teams and different characters, how it would be in the Age of Apocalypse universe. So you just get thrust right in.
Sorry, man. Yeah, well, I'm skipping ahead in some of the comments. That's right. Rob Liefeld is the master. Okay.
I never
Okay.
hated Rob Liefeld.
Oh, I like making fun of some stuff, but at the end of the day, I like Rob. His passion for comics is obvious. You know what I mean? Like he's stuck in there. So
Yeah.
what you touched on was all the crossover events. At one point in comics, there were so many indies. They went from being called alternative comics to indies. And we had Image and Late Books and Valiant, focusing on writing with Jim Shooter steering. A lot of exciting things were going on. But that led to the competition of the events and the books. You had 2 events of Batman around this time that you're talking about, the 3 events, starting with the death of Superman.
Yeah.
This led to all sorts of things that just the spec market had increased, and you had people who weren't actual comic book collectors thinking they were going to get the death of Superman, for example, and end up retiring and buying a house or putting their kids through college and everything like that, right? So everybody came in, the bubble got huge, lots of money was being made, a lot of
It's the
competition.
#1 selling graphic novel of all time, the
Right.
595 whatever
Absolutely.
Death of Superman trade.
So some of the things that were happening in 94 is where that spec bubble actually busted, like I said. And this would lead to, between 94 and 1997, 2/3 of comic book shops shutting down in the country. Tons of comic book companies going out of business, tons of them. Things blowing up and impacting, and Marvel eventually doing Chapter 11, right? So 94, some of the things I've kind of wrote down that was going on. Um, I've already said some of them. Let me find it here. Valiant was bought out by Acclaim Comics. Marvel in 94, 95, whoever owned Marvel spent $150 million buying a card company because cards and card games were
Yeah.
kind of rising. Deathmate came out during 94, where it was Valiant after they got rid of Shooter, doing this thing with Acclaim and Valiant and having their little crossover, which has been mentioned. Oh man, Series Comics went out of business. Big Bang Comics went out of business. Continuity Comics went out of business. Eternity Comics. In the X-Men books, Scott Summers, they had two or three things going on. Their big stunt before this Age of Apocalypse was they finally had Scott Summer marry Jean. They also had I can't read my writing. They had some kind of child play crossover in their books. And then they had the Phoenix War or something. I was out.
Phoenix Convent.
right on. I think we had the Spider-Man clone saga, and that
That was
goes
terrible, by the way.
right. That's why now you're getting the landscape. This leads to Age of Apocalypse, and then Age of Apocalypse sort of started in December of '94 with I think it was X-Men 41. That's where Legion
Yeah,
actually killed Xavier. And then by January to May of 1995, we get this, right? And in 95, I think we had Spider-Man 400 where Aunt May
uh,
died. And
yeah, I remember that.
yeah, I was out. I mean, there were
Me
so many
too.
things to be out of Marvel. Let me see what's going on. And the biggest thing is that this is when the suits came in because all the talent left and went to Image and had
Yeah,
late and all that stuff going on. And they split up all the titles into 5 sections. They got rid of editor in chief. So what made Marvel unique with its continuity, they go back to like a sort of a editorial umbrella system that
yeah,
DC had in the 60s. You had the Spider-Man books over one person, the rest of the Marvel universe over one person, the X-Men, the license. There was 5 in Marvel Edge where they couldn't fit people in, like the Punisher. All the Punisher books ended, got canceled. A bunch of books started getting canceled, and newer books like Shazam #1 by Jerry Ordway was starting. And then we had some companies come back up. We had Broadway come up. Defiant Comics went out of business. That was made because of Marvel suing them, not because, and they won their lawsuit, but they spent all their money defending themselves in court.
oh, they
And
lost the war.
yeah, so Jim Shooter went from Valiant. A coup came up so they could sell to Acclaim. They got rid of Jim. He started Defiant, which was I have all the Defiant stuff, and then he starts Broadway, and it didn't really go anywhere. He kept finding investors, and then Diamond with Diamond Publishers, everybody talking about them. DC, Dark Horse, and I think Image is who I have wrote down here. That's when Diamond really got a hold of a lot of the market because of Marvel trying to do stupid shit themselves. And that's when Diamond really got a hold of the comic book industry, being the distributor.
Right in the mid
So
'90s.
yeah, so all this means is that like they were in trouble. They made a lot of money going into the '90s. It blew up. It didn't even make it halfway through the decade without it blowing up, and we felt the repercussions. And what do they do? To me, after Claremont left, they raped, pillaged, and just went through everything that Claremont had spent 17 years doing. They
Yeah,
went they went through that stuff in 3 or 4 years. And to me, Age of Apocalypse was like the first. I thought the first original thing where they're really getting away from the Claremont stuff and going in a new direction. Turns out they were just doing Days of Future Past turned up to 10. I'm like,
yeah. There's you could definitely say that.
yeah. So if everybody followed that, and if you guys followed that, it was still an exciting time to be into comics. But this Age of Apocalypse may have sort of been a what's the word can I say? It kind of went all downhill after that, in my opinion. You know,
I agree. Age of Apocalypse is after that is when I checked out of X-Men
yeah,
because I'm like, this is too much to read. Like, I'm a fan of less is more. There should be 2 Batman books. There should be 2 Superman books, Action
right,
Comics and Superman, Detective Comics and Batman. X-Men worked well when it was 2 books. Why do we have to have 7 or more every month? And
yeah,
then,
that's
it just it gets to be too much to read a story. And a lot of it ends up being filler anyway. Like I just
right.
want a good 6 issue story, 12 issue story, and then the occasional fill ins. But 45 issues to tell a story is getting to be a bit much.
Is that how much? Is that 45 issues? Is that's what's in of Age of Apocalypse, the
I
original?
mean, I think it's 40 altogether, but once you throw in some of the companion stuff, like
Yeah,
the X Chronicles, like that was the 2 issues where one was set 10 years before the current timeline and the other one was 5 years before the current
yeah.
timeline.
See, and
So,
what you're pointing on is exactly how a lot of people view it and the way I remember it and stuff. We had a lot of stuff going on, but very little of it was readable. I mean, check out the mustard here, right? We mentioned this, the Spider Clone saga to everybody bonkers. What was going on with Spider Man in the '90s? It's his worst decade. The crap they,
Maximum Carnage is where I checked out, and then I'd peek in like, what? They're doing the Clone Saga. They're bringing his clone back. Like they're killing Aunt May. I had checked out Spider Man, and from what I
yeah,
understand, I haven't missed much.
yeah. And then I loved it when I mentioned this before, but people seem to forget like the X-Men were always a priority. Like Marvel even had a what the Remember what the funny stories?
Yeah,
They had a satire issue of of Fall of the Mutants, where all the mutants are running around and they're just like, the enemy is coming. The big enemy is finally coming. And it turns out to be the Avengers and every other hero who aren't the mutants because
yeah,
X-Men took over. That was Marvel's priority. And that's kind of what was going on because I mentioned that even one of the worst things Marvel's ever put out, that it's
Avengers: The
so bad.
Costume.
Yeah, it's so bad people have forgotten about it. And that was right before this Age of Apocalypse by about a year or two. And you said you had the collection of
I
Avengers.
have the omnibus. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never opened it, but oh my god, like I have no interest in rereading it. It's just because I'm a completist.
Here's how I remember it, and I do not care if I'm wrong. It was that bad. Mike Diodato Jr. and his stable, his art studio, got to do these horrible redesigns of the Avengers. They
Yeah,
were horrid.
horrible.
Yeah, and the main plot was is Tony Stark had ended up where here it is. I mentioned Kang this morning. Kang the Conqueror, one of the worst villains ever. I think people are finally kind of seeing it, or maybe they're not. I don't know. But Kang the Conqueror, Tony Storm had been working for him always. So their answer to how to fight Kong in this, they go back and they pluck a 17-year-old Tony Stark out of
Yeah, he was 17 or 18. It was so stupid.
yeah. And there you go. That's how good it was. I'm like right there. That's all you need to know. It was such shit. It got abandoned. They got it out. It was abandoned. And then that's why I'm saying this is probably like the last hurrah of Marvel and the mutants, in my opinion. Until they got their act together. This is what's helped led to chapter 11. So not only does this book have fans, but I can also kind of pick it apart and celebrate it at the same time. You know what I mean? So I think this is like one of the last great things Marvel did in the '90s. Before they had Marvels, they had that 4-issue miniseries Marvels. That was just retelling the history that Kurt Busiek structured in there. We got Alex Ross. There were some good things in there. And then at the end of it, it was like Alex Ross to me was the best thing that Marvel had. We had Earth X, a little bit of Universe X going into the 2000s before Casada took over. So not only is this of its era, but it's also one of the last things that I think was a success for Marvel that they really needed. Yeah, I guess it's showing up. So where would you like to start here? You want me to look at our comments here, and then we finally get into
Yeah,
the.
check out the comments and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, we talked long enough to where whoever's going to show up is showing up. We got a good crowd here. Yeah. Ooh, Paolo's all over this, man. The race to Martinsville. I have Martinsville and Bristol racetracks within driving distance. Age of Apocalypse was about to start in my country. He's in Portugal when Marvel went bankrupt and they wreaked havoc with international licensing. That's what we were getting at.
Yeah.
He had to start reading almost exclusively the U.S. editions because it had a 3-year jump in the continuity. Right on. Yep. Okay, what we got here? Rob Life. Oh no, some Rob. Rob Liefeld should never be mentioned in the same sentence as Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane. Oh, that's right. He is the master. Yeah. I don't have that much hate with the guy.
Me
He
neither,
talks
but
so
it's
fast.
funny.
When I hear his podcast or see him pop up on something, um, he's still like an ADD kid, full of energy and stuff. So yeah.
He's passionate.
Yeah, as an Avengers fan, I was annoyed they had taken the back seat. The local publisher was also about the X's and the spiders. Yeah,
They
Marvel
told
actually.
him.
Somebody at Marvel actually came out and said it didn't matter if we had quality stories. We put Spider-Man on it, people are buying it. Uh,
There's a true statement. There was a lot of comics I bought just because Spider-Man's in this. Yeah, no,
there
I'll
you
check it
go.
out.
Okay. Long running characters Iron Man, Thor, and Silver Surfer have been taken out of the anthologies. Okay. Okay. A lot of injustice going on there. And we got a lot of comments. An unrelated thought, I would love to see a future video of your thoughts on the new DC Comics Absolute Comics. If I get around to it. X-Men 95. Oh, I forgot about that. The X-Men cartoon started in 92, I think.
Yeah,
See, that's what was so cool in the 90s. We had the X-Men cartoon, Batman the Animated Series, Tick, all these great Big Guy and Rescue the Robot had a cartoon there towards the end, the Hulk. There was a Silver Surfer cartoon. That's you
when
can
was
find
that
that.
Spawn cartoon on HBO? I thought that was pretty good too.
I want to say that was like 95 or 96. I remember I had a roommate moved in. I had an apartment that I lived mostly on my own. Loved the apartment, but I had two roommates over a course of 3 or 4 years. And when he moved in, he got cable. He got HBO just so we could watch the Spawn cartoon. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, X-Men in 95 was like WWF in 92. Oh, a bunch of filler fights with jobbers waiting on the pay-per-view events. TL Hopper. Yeah, that's the one that killed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Read a lot of Marvel What If simply because they were cheaper books. I still believe X-Men should be in the Marvel Comics universe, but it's contained with no crossovers and the other heroes. And then they did it. It should be only Storm and Wolverine. My problem when I was cantankerous as a kid is how there was supposedly all this mutant hysteria and hate going on in a shared universe, but the only place they talked about it was an X-Men. You didn't really hear that much about it.
Right. Like no one cared if a Avenger was a mutant. You know what I'm saying? They weren't fearful of them when they were saving lives, but oh my God, it's an X-Man.
My whole thing is you're living in a planet, you're living on a planet where we have aliens, you have Galactus, you've seen it, you got the Fantastic Four running around, you got a man dressed up in a Spider-Man costume, shooting goo everywhere, sliding around. And why would you admit you're a mutant? Just come up with some stupid origin. I got bit by a radioactive otter. People would have if you don't want people to hate you as a mutant, don't admit you're a
Yeah.
mutant. Just say
Yeah,
you
the
were a mutant.
government did this to me, guys. I'm a hero.
That's what I'm getting at, right? So there was a lot of plot holes even as a kid. I jumped on the X-Men with Asgardian Wars. I love that. I still have it. I still read it. I love that, right?
It was
So
Mutant Massacre for me.
right. So let's keep me on track. I sit here and make fun of Rob Liefeld for acting like an ADHD kid, and I can't even get on track.
All
Uh,
right, so I have
so
a question.
yes,
Legion Quest. Did this need to be 4 issues?
remind me what Legion Quest is.
It's the 4 issues beginning up to the Age of Apocalypse, where basically Legion wakes
Oh,
up, decides, oh hey, I want to go kill Magneto in the past because it's going to
yeah.
help my dad save the future and make it even better. You know, this could have been 1 issue.
I agree. I agree. It could have been one issue, but I'll be. Did the Legion Quest it had the corner box? They took the dog-eared corner and put Legion Quest on the corner.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Uh, I'm going to say you're absolutely right. It could have been one issue, but at the time, we need to remember the era, and I still could be wrong. This is just an opinion, okay? But you have to remember there is no social media, no real internet,
Correct.
no way to grab the readers that are outside of comics to let them know that this is here. When are the books coming out? So I can see them having a bit of a timeline. We're going to be starting this January of 95. We're doing these books in December so we can get people to know that we need to have them there. You're allowing the reader and everybody to be prepared for these books to come out because, like you said, 40 to 45 issues in the 90s, over 800 books at some point on the stands potentially if you had everyone that was coming out. Fierce
Yeah.
competition. Yeah, I think it was. I think I could see why they thought that was necessary, or
Okay. I
maybe
mean,
they
at least that's a good answer.
yeah. I can see why they did it, but was it necessary? Probably with 2020 hindsight, we can say no. You know what I mean? Like we didn't know what was coming. You know.
No, I want to say in one of the issues before Legion Quest, there was a scene or two with Iceman and Rogue are at Iceman's parents' house.
Yeah.
And his dad comes in and they're sitting there at the kitchen table and he's like, "Oh my God, Bobby, what's up with you bringing girls home all the time? All you do is bring home a different girl here and there. Like, what? This is crazy. What's with all these girls?" And I'm sitting there reading that, like, "Oh man, things changed."
The stuff that I couldn't stand. Yeah, I got you. I'll change that. Yeah. What I couldn't stand, and the Legion of Superheroes did it. Also they had an issue, but I couldn't stand those issues where you have superheroes. I know they're supposed to have fun, and we're supposed to see that to love the characters and have their breathers and stuff. But I hated it when they were doing stupid shit like it's a softball game. Nobody's allowed
Yeah,
to use their powers. No, I'm like, I don't care. I don't want to see people.
yeah. Like, why are you getting a lecture from your dad?
Yeah,
Like, you're an X-Man who's in his mid-20s. You're not
yeah.
living under his roof.
Yeah, because they thought the people that were reading the comics were probably getting lectured by their dad, or they were doing free
Yeah.
reading for themselves. Who knows, man? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a synopsis there of what was going on with these books. So for 4 months, there was a ton. Before this, there was a ton, like you were saying, a ton of X books out. You went from Uncanny X-Men to X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, Excalibur. Um, so what they did is, let me see what
Cable
number.
went to X-Man.
Yeah, Cable went to X-Men. So your X Force book turned into Gambit and the Externals. I'll be showing those. Generation X went to Generation Next, is what it was called. The Uncanny X Men were the Astonishing X Men, which may be the superstar book out of all this. Wolverine went into Weapon X. X Factor went into Factor X. Wait a minute. X Factor turned into Factor X. X Men,
Great
like,
name, by the way.
yeah, Cable went into, yeah, it's what they were doing. And then you had the bookends in the Legion Quest prequel books you were talking about, right? Some of the people that were working on these books, they had quite a lot of good names. Joe Madura, I think he was the superstar artist that came out of this. Okay, we'll show his stuff, and I think everybody's going to be like, oh, yeah. Adam Kubert, Tony Daniel, who I cannot believe that guy's been around that long.
Yeah,
Tony,
I noticed that too, and I was like, wow, he worked on this?
right. Salvador LaRocca, one of my favorites, Chris Bacalo, and I still remember that guy as an Image guy. It's been 34 years and he's still an Image guy in my head. He was an Image for a blink of an eye, according to this. Shade the Changing Man, Death miniseries, a few
Okay.
things with DC, and then he ended up coming on the Generation Next. Ended up doing a little Spider-Man later on. Adam Kubert, Steve Scorsese. If you're from the '90s, Steve Scorsese ended up doing the Matrix. The
The
working on the
Matrix comics? Or you're talking,
movie.
oh, in the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Terry Dodson, which I thought it was Adam Hughes with some of the Jean Grey pages I saw back in the day. I didn't realize Terry Dodson's been around that long either. Ian Churchill, Carlos Panchico. I know I'm butchering that name. Rest in peace. Joe Bennett, of all people. I didn't realize Joe Bennett. He was doing Catwoman in the '90s. I didn't know he was over here. And then the writers, for half a second, you had Mark Wade on there. Scott
Yeah, I was
Lobdell.
surprised on that one.
Yeah. Well, Mark Wade was coming up. He had his book, The Flash. He started writing it with a Silver Age
Well, this is
optimism.
before Kingdom Come.
Yeah. Yeah. Kingdom Come was Alex Ross's baby. Mark Wade used to make that clear to people as the years have gone by.
Oh,
He's kind
good,
of
because
he's,
that makes a lot of sense.
he's kind of he's kind of taken more and more credit over the years. Anyway, Scott Lobdell, Mark Wade, Fabian Nacinza. I can't
He
believe
was
I'm
around a lot in the 90s.
Yeah. His new Warrior stuff is fantastic, I thought. John Francis Moore, Larry Hama. That's why Factor X was so hard for me to read. Larry Hama, Warren Ellis, before he was a superstar. He was on his way up. Jeff Loeb came in there of Hush fame, the one, Howard Mackey, that was a hard one to read, and
Yeah,
Terry
I agree.
Kavanagh. Terry Kavanagh, bless his heart, seems like to be a cool guy, but everything that seemed like he touched, he was kind of like a Paul Cooperberg of DC. Everything he touched felt like it ended up getting canceled at some point. But that could just be me remembering. Oh,
Yeah.
two other artists were Roger Cruz and Steve Epting. I think, and you guys can correct me, I think Roger Cruz is the one that I always blank out on his name, and he ended up doing the 2000s Batman show that had a real huge filmation feel to it. I think he was the main guy on that. So that's a buttload of talent, considering that a lot of the talent had gone to Image. Barry Windsor Smith and people were doing indie books and other smaller companies, Rune, Ultraverse, and all this stuff. Like I said, everybody was trying to jump on an Image to where Image ended up cutting a lot of people's books for being so late after they got that second and third wave in. You had Wildstorm and Homage Comics at Image under Jim Lee, who was grabbing a lot of talent. Alex Ross, Kurt Busiek, and stuff. So, considering how competitive the books were, also the talent was a bit competitive, and I think they got a great round of people on this. I really do.
Yeah, I think the talent that worked on it did a pretty decent job.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, now these guys did something to where I think this could be considered a dead universe, even though they've done they popped up and they picked up on it and done some other stuff with this over the years, the Age of Apocalypse. But at the time, this was going to be a 4-month crossover, and they
When you say
actually,
dead universe, like it
yeah,
literally ends with the universe basically dying.
yeah,
Like spoilers, it's a 30-year it's 30 years old, but they dropped those nukes and that's it. So like it always was weird to me when like, oh, we're gonna go back to the Age of Apocalypse. It's like, why? There's nothing left. It's ash and rubble.
yeah, yeah, yeah. For guys that haven't read it, and the series actually ends with Jean Grey, right? They pull from the the Dark Phoenix saga, though, in the way that Jean never lives. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
basically, we end up in a situation I can't believe we jumped to the end, and we'll back
Yeah,
up.
sorry.
But for what Pon was saying here is that, now check this out. Jean Grey is using her telekinesis to hold nuclear bombs up in the sky so they don't land, and they made havoc. There's Jean Grey has ended up with Wolverine. She's not with Scott Summer, and Scott is hanging out with his brother Havoc, who they've turned into a freaking psychopath, which blows my mind. And she
Yeah.
shot in the back, and that causes all the nuclear weapons, bombs, to fall to the earth. Right when Bishop is able to convince, Magneto's and Bishop and all them are able to come back, and we have a whole bunch of people escape the Age of Apocalypse, where we go back proper into the Marvel universe like it never
Yeah.
happened.
Right, like it never happened.
Yeah. We've got the Gray Beast. He's running around, the Sugar Man, X-Man, all this stuff. We get a few celebrities. Blink,
Yeah,
Blink,
she
who had,
ended up in the Exiles, and that was actually pretty cool, I heard.
yeah,
But Blink was such a popular character. They waited like 5 years. That series came out in 1999. Like,
yeah.
I had already been gone out of comics and didn't hear about it till many years later.
Well, yeah, there's Blink right there, right? So,
Dude, she was great in the whole thing. Like, I liked
well,
her character a lot reading it.
I don't know. People can correct me, and I'm going by memory because, like I said, I was well into the military. I was into Defiant Comics, Valiant Comics. I mean, I've still got the books. You know what I mean? But I was out of it by now, right? So one of the things did was that we had the one of the stunts of the '90s were the chromium covers and the shiny covers.
Yeah,
So of course in the booking event we get these shiny covers, but this actually worked because this is a striking image by Roger Cruz, or no, Joe Madura, where we see a one-handed Wolverine, which actually made it a Deadpool Wolverine. I'm going to
did we
solo mode.
ever get an explanation for why his hand did not grow back?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Well, that's what I'm getting ready to get at here on one thing. Um, so right away you see all these great characters in the striking image, and you see the one-handed Wolverine, and what you just said was one of the things that a lot of people noticed right away with the image is, does he still have a healing factor in this timeline, or what are we
Yeah.
doing? That, I don't know how they questioned it, but that was quite the conversation piece, right? Maybe they did. I think it's, I don't know. I mean, I've got a problem. I've got an X-Men annual. Let me show these images here, right? Now, the one thing that caught my eye was Sabretooth having a character called Wild Child from the Alpha Flight books
Yeah,
on
I
the,
remember Wild Child.
yeah, I love this. Okay.
Yeah, I did too.
This was the image that got me, was seeing Sabretooth with Wild Child on a chain. Uh,
Mr. Creed.
yeah.
This
What
is
I
my
didn't
favorite
like,
version of Sabretooth.
right on. Now, what I didn't like, let's see, is maybe I should have had a picture up before all this. Yeah, what I didn't like was how they ended up making Apocalypse look like a freaking '80s cartoon.
Oh, see, I thought Apocalypse. This was my favorite version of him.
Okay.
Like I thought he was like a badass in this, but you
All
probably
right.
like the one from the late '80s, like in the X Factor books.
Let me get out of this. Let me get the solo thing out here. Okay, so well, I was there from the beginning. I was collecting X Factor when we got our first appearance by Jackson Weiss, where he's kind of in the shadows,
Yeah,
and then we get Louise Simonson and to come in on the next issue and kind of flesh out what that big cliffhanger they had of who this Apocalypse was. I thought he just looked like a cartoon. What I didn't realize is that I come from an era where when we got manga and anime and things like that, we got bad. Okay, with the anime, we got bad dubbing, right? We got horrible dubbing, English dubbing on in horrible cuts of these great anime movies. I found out later That's why Akira really grabbed me, because Akira was done right. Before that, I saw Warriors of the Wind, which is one of the most horrible cuts of the first Studio Ghibli movies, Nausicaa. So I didn't realize that this had some. Joe Maduro, I feel like, is the superstar artist of this series,
Yeah,
because
I agree.
when he did the 4 issues of Astonishing X-Men, uh, people really noticed the stuff he did, and it was heavily anime and manga influenced, with the haircuts, the styles, and that was permeating through a lot of books. With Pat Lee, uh, J. Scott Campbell, and a lot of these guys coming out. They were getting influenced by anime, manga, and video games. So this was like on the pulse of the 90s for a lot of people. And then they brought in John Romita Jr. to do the bookend cover of Alpha Omega, where this ends. And to me, this was like, you could just kind of see they were going back to where they were, and the two styles being so different. This is the guy that did more like Massacre. He was one of the main '80s uh, guys who drew the X-Men before Sylvestre and Jim Lee and all those guys came on and became superstars on that book. So yeah, that was a little nudge and a wink to the people who were there during the '80s and stuff with it. Um, and then what I also liked, jump in here, is that we got these 2 issues of like, where's the humans? So basically what happened is that what cracks me up is when we start Age of Apocalypse, it's the '90s, and they started in Seattle. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
We finally pick up in the Seattle. We are seeing the Earth, America, and America has been divided into 4 sections. Guys, you're not going to get every little piece of what's going on in Age of Apocalypse here. There's plenty of videos out there. We're going to be like just touching on what we like and what we remember. But it starts out in Seattle, and the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. Apocalypse has taken over North America, and it's 4 sections. And each one has one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen uh, taking over that part of the country and running it, and everybody's playing with genetics and stuff. You got some guy named Holocaust I've never seen before. They kind of hint that we've seen him before, in the original timeline. Mr. Sinister, and what is it, Sugar Man, and some guy with a nose ring, and all these
Uh,
characters I don't know. Yeah.
yeah.
But what has happened is they've got one character who remembers the timeline because he chased Legion trying to stop him, and somehow chased him into the Age of Apocalypse after Xavier was killed. And it's Bishop. And he's able to convince Magneto, who picked up Xavier's dream, even though they went so far back in the timeline, Xavier didn't have the dream for the X-Men yet. They were
So
still
my question is, in X-Men Alpha 1, it's like he's just been wandering the Earth for 20 years in this mysterious hood, and then he just walks up to Magneto and goes, "Murderer." And then it starts explaining everything, like, what have you been doing for 20 years? Like, have you just been in a trance and that broke you out? Or,
You're talking about Bishop, right? Yeah, that's
yeah,
what
at
I'm
the
saying.
very beginning of the story.
Because not only do we see Bishop in the Marvel universe, but when he goes to the Age of Apocalypse, he looks completely different. He's bald
Yeah.
headed. I
Yep.
know he's got the gear on, right? And how do they get convince us? They again went back to um, the Savage Land stories with Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, because Magneto and Rogue end up having a little bit of a relationship. Well, it carries on to here. Gambit ended up taking Rogue to Magneto when they were all X-Men or something,
Yeah.
and to say, can you help her with her powers? Every time you touch her skin, this happens. Well, Magneto is able to make a magnetic thin layer around his skin where he can touch her. So she drops old Gambit and ends up going off with Magneto, and they got a kid.
Makes
So,
total sense, by the way.
so if I'm remembering right, to for Bishop to convince them what's going on, Rogue uses her powers and gets some of her memories, and everybody now can see, Bishop's telling the truth. This is not the real timeline. On a
Yeah.
side note, if I remember right, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's no telepaths here, because
Yeah, the Apocalypse had them all killed.
they didn't just have them killed. There's 6 brains in separate bowls they keep in Factor X. Showed them. There's 6 brains shown around. If you're a telepath, they would take your brain and put it in a bowl and make it work for you.
Well, wait, wasn't the Shadow King a telepath?
I don't know. I think
Yeah, I don't remember. He was working for Apocalypse in one of them, though.
right. Right. So that's what I'm trying to get at, right? So all these books and stuff, right? And then they have an underground railroad where they've made it feel like the river Styx. You know, they got some character in a hoodie, in a river that picks up Nightcrawler. Now let me back up. I'm getting really bad here. So basically, Magneto decides to gather up everybody who's ever an X-Men, and now that we know that this isn't the real timeline, he automatically comes up with a plan. Okay, and there's 4 quests people have to go on. Gambit and his externals are going to go off into space, and they're going to
Yeah,
find
they got to go get the Mcron crystal.
the M-Cron crystal because it can change reality. And
Right.
and Caliber X and Nightcrawler and his crew, they have to go find Avalon, which is actually the Savage Land, and
Right.
it's run by the Angel. It's a sanctuary, and they
Well,
have
in
to,
Avalon, they were looking for destiny
and that's they have to find destiny
in the
exactly.
Savage Land. Yeah, and
The
they
character,
find the Juggernaut. He's the one who leads them. He's like
yeah,
a monk now.
he's like a monk, and they got somebody on a boat, and it feels like the river Styx. And what they've done is
Yeah, it does feel like, yeah, I got that.
they've turned this into a underground railroad for humans because what they do is they sneak humans out to be part of the Hallermouse's of the Human High Council. I wrote that so I'd remember it. They're over in Europe, and this is where we find out like Peter Parker and Reed Richards are already dead. Thanks to Xavier dying before the Fantastic Four went up there, all these people who would have been heroes are still heroes, but they're doing the resistance as humans. I love
I
this
think
more.
they said they died in the evacuation of New York or something. But
Right. I
yeah,
love these 2 issues explaining where all the other heroes are in the Age of Apocalypse. I thought this was
yeah,
fantastic.
I agree.
Yeah, X Universe 2 parts. I thought that was fantastic, right? Okay, and then the other one is that Generation Next with Kitty Pryde and Colossus wearing a do rag over his head for some reason, like
Yeah, the
pirate.
artwork was interesting in that, and that whole story was a bit horrifying.
Yeah, we'll
Like
spoil. Yeah, I feel like I'm butchering all this, but I think you get the point. This is there's a lot of stuff. So then it's like their quest is to go find Elenia magic, because she
But
can
by the
do
way, I loved when they said chance of getting her alive 0.00.
right. That's what I'm getting at. They're like, this is hopeless. They're in the age of apocalypse. This is all like these sound like simple little quests and stuff, but no, it's yeah, what you're saying. I don't even remember the 4th one, nor do I care. I'm like,
Yeah,
there's
no,
the 4th.
I get it.
So that's their whole thing. Now, the whole thing about this is that you hear how I'll have a bunch of these moving parts, okay? And this was for a 4-month crossover. You know what I mean? They weren't building a real universe to yet another comic book company showing building a whole new universe like Ultraverse or something.
Yeah,
This is how much they cared and worked and were passionate and did all this stuff. That's why I'm saying if you don't like one book, just go to the other one because they got something else going on in this. Listen to all this work and all these moving pieces they have for a crossover. I mean, what am I wrong or
no, I think you're spot on. But I do think Magneto, to me, was like the main character of it all. Like,
Okay.
the plot moves through him. He's the one who put all the pieces in motions. He shows up in all the books. He's the one there at the end.
Yeah.
So I thought he kind of helped the whole thing. And also, when you're reading him, even though he agrees with Charles's dream, he's still a very ends justify the means kind of guy. His personality did not change that much.
Right. Despite a lot of these other characters were still really out of character. There's no way I can picture Havoc being a killer. You know what I mean? Like a
Yeah.
cold-blooded killer enjoying it.
Or just hating his brother so much. Like, dude,
Right.
go see a therapist.
Yeah. So there is the classic image of Rogue that I saw people passing around. That hairstyle was out of some really popular anime at the time or something. The bob cut or whatever that is on top, but we got the strands of hair coming down the side, going way down. I ended up seeing this for years. Storm even had this. This is the Joe Mandura books right here, the Astonishing X-Men. To me, if you're going to get 4 issues, if you want to complete something, I think these are the 4 issues you need to get the complete feel of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every issue that's well thought up on how to keep the reader up, even though they have a bunch of things going on. In all of the first issues, there are recaps and stuff. They introduce all the characters. Back when comic writers knew that every issue could be somebody's first issue. But in the letters page, in the letters column, they caught you up on this world. This is how we knew where everybody was in this timeline.
Yeah, the level of detail to the maps and all that were just phenomenal.
Yeah. So to me, this is actually something that if you're into the X-Men, if you like alternate timeline stories, if you like post-apocalyptic stuff, even though there's still things in here that I kind of squirmed a little bit, realizing, well, they're thinking kids will still read these also. It feels like there's a few things they backed up on, and some people went too far with some of the violence and stuff. Um, I think this is like one of those things that you could end up actually studying this. This is a whole like this would be like you collecting all the new universe books or all the Defiant books, all these dead universe books. You know what I mean? Age of Apocalypse. They put so much work into these. They pack a lot of information in each issue, and it did kind of rush at the end. Structure wise, I'm not happy with the stories, but detail wise, I'm impressed. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah. There's enough there where you could go all kinds of places if this was ongoing titles and they restarted the whole universe. Hello, Shiva. Yeah. This morning it was Lester. Today it's Shiva. One's the night shift and one's the day shift. But anyway, but what do you think? Didn't you say that you thought the Astonishing X-Men was your favorite book out of this?
Yeah, The Astonishing X-Men was my favorite book. However, Next or Generation Next was the book where like I always remembered how horrifying it ended, you know? Like the fact that they all went down there, but Colossus, he only has one mission and he does not care at all about
Yeah.
anybody else except rescuing his sister, and that is made abundantly clear by the end.
I'll skip ahead to that one next. Let's do a few comments here, right? John Jones, Ghost in the Shell. Now, going by memory, Ghost in the Shell is one of the animes I like. But I think the first anime came out in 95, the same year this did. So I'm assuming I always assume animes were mangas first. Appleseed was the only real manga I remember kind of reading off the top, excuse me, of my head. That was here in America. A few issues of Akira. All that stuff came later. Lone Wolf and Cub. I bet the name Avalon was John Francis Moore's idea. I'm pretty sure he's the writer on that. He was doing something similar with an Underground Railroad in X-Men 2099. I forgot about those. I remember thinking about that when I was
Oh my
thinking.
god, yeah. That's like 1992 when that came out, huh?
Yeah, and this morning somebody mentioned Doom 2099. That's why it was on my mind. So you also had the 2099 universe going on at Marvel.
I think Doctor Doom is supposed to come into contact with Doom 29. I heard that within the last week from somewhere, so maybe that's how you heard it.
Oh, that'd be cool. Roger Cruz and Joe Bennett, as well as Luke Ross, were all part of the Brazilian invasion of the 90s. Uh, and that's where I'm kind of wondering. Yeah, that's where Mike Deodato Jr. comes in with his art studio doing Avengers: The Crossing. That was horrible, also. Yeah, yeah. Pen names, of course. Yes, yes. Our aficionado here, our international man of comics here, schooling us here. Roger Cruz had a long-standing feud with Joe Madura. Cruz was about the same age, but he swiped Madura a lot. Yeah, I remember when the comic swiping thing came to the attention of us muggles who didn't work in the business. People started noticing a lot of swiping going on. I forgot about that. A lot of people try to go after Liefeld for swiping some Perez stuff every now and then. Didn't Jeff Loeb launch X-Men as he was going as an ongoing from AOA? That was just it. That book, nobody knew it was going to be an ongoing. He was one of the characters that escaped the Age of Apocalypse. Where you had Cable, he was
Yeah, he did the X-Men series, didn't he?
yeah, yeah, X-Man, yeah. And I don't have those 4 issues here, but Cable was Madeline Pryor, the clone of Jean Grey, and Scott Summers, Cyclops' baby. Okay,
Right.
X-Man ended up being I think it was Mister
Gene and
Sinister.
Scott's.
I can't remember somebody. Yeah, he
It was
was
Gene and Scott's. Mr.
Jean Grey
Sinister
and Scott,
experimented on them, and they grew Nate Gray in the laboratory
and his whole purpose was to defeat Apocalypse. So yeah.
because he wanted to take a powerful telekinetic and telepath and combine it with Scott Summers' DNA.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you had I don't know why they compared him to Cable. That's not Cable. They're stepbrothers.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
really are.
You know, Tats Comics, what's up, brother? Good to see you. John, he loved Excalibur, the Alan Davis stuff. I mean, that's my Excalibur. I was really let down with the Warren Ellis stuff. Oh, well, here we go. We got here. Okay. Got a few more here, man. Just bear with me. I'm having some issue here getting it to slide without going everywhere. Okay, Paolo, I remember Inferno, a lot of setup, then 4 months of X-Men and X Factor with New Mutants and Excalibur doing side quests. Solo Wolverine, didn't even mention it. So it's not about the 4 months. It's more that not all titles should have been involved. Either that, or they could have done Age of Apocalypse as a crossover in the annuals. There, like I said, we're doing 20. I'm not disagreeing nor agreeing
Yeah.
at the same
I
time.
mean, it didn't need to be 40 plus issues, but
Yeah.
who's
Um,
to say what's the right number? I don't know.
yeah. So you're looking at 2020 hindsight. Palo is completely correct, but would we have known that at the time? You know what I
No.
mean? They had a whole bunch of annuals over the few years before that where you would get 4-part stories and stuff going through them.
Days of Future Present was a really good one.
Yeah, yeah, things like that. And Inferno, I had the whole omnibus right here. I was a sucker. I was there for the More Like Massacre, Inferno, Fall of the Mutants, and then I've collected the missing issues and stuff. Right, Age of Apocalypse. I got the all that stuff later.
Yeah.
That was it was a lot of money, right? So let's go to just kind of show off these covers here of Generation Next. And if there's any artwork you want to show off or something, man, feel free, man. But yeah, Generation Next was a very interesting book art wise. Chris Bacalow's artwork is not, it's the kind of stuff that you need to hold in your hands. What was it about this book you liked?
The
Yeah,
choices made by Colossus to show who he really is,
yeah,
But I liked Paige Gunther, the Sugarman, Mondo, uh, Kitty Pryde. She had Wolverine's claws that she made or whatever, you
right.
know. So it was just an interesting take on those characters, but it ended up turning into a horror story rescue.
Yeah, yeah. And then by the time we got to Omega, the end of the story, I think Havoc didn't he end up like killing Colossus and Kitty? Was he the one that took him out?
No, what happened was, well, Colossus ends up killing Kitty because she goes to stand in front of him and she didn't phase.
Yeah,
Because she was like, there's no way my husband's going to kill me. And
right.
then he does. And then somebody shoots Colossus in the back, and that's how he dies. I can't remember. I don't know if it was Havoc or not,
Yeah,
but he dies talking to his sister.
right. So this book, I think this is the most beautifully written book or drawn book in my opinion. Chris
Yeah.
Backlow's artwork really stands out. It's refined. It's like I said, it's
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I really enjoyed the artwork, all of it. Like he drew all the characters well. I liked how he drew Colossus. Like
yeah,
it was
nothing is
good.
static. Everything he has that Kirby approach, in my opinion, whether that's on purpose or not, where nobody is static. Everything is something is happening in every panel. You know what I mean?
I reread it so many times just because of that reason, because you would find new things and interesting panels that just made the book better.
The way he drew the Sugar Man and whoever that fourth horseman was with the nose ring and the bangs and all
Yeah,
that.
they said his name. It was like Quintus or whatever. It was weird.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Story wise, it was like one of my least favorite. Art wise, I was just like fascinated. I could just sit there and just pour over the artwork more and more. And I followed the story better with that. But like I said, his designs, his proportions, his exaggerations, exactly where they need to be. This
Yeah,
is this
I
is
agree.
this is classic. And I laughed because when I saw the smiley face here, I automatically thought, in the way he's panning it, I was
Uh
like,
huh.
Watchmen. You know,
Yeah, Doctor Manhattan's everywhere.
yeah. So anyway, like I said, I was already a Bacalo fan from his Shade the Changing Man, his death. I mean, look at these. Look at these. I mean, you have to study the pictures to
The
know what.
pictures almost tell the story.
There we go. There's
You know
Sugar
what I'm
Man.
saying?
Yeah, yeah. I could follow the story better with his pictures and not reading anything. So everything that he has drawn is fascinating to look at. some of the stuff looks like Monster Muppets sometimes with the nose.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a Jim Henson vibe on some of those characters.
Well, that's how I feel, especially right there. That to me, that is '70s head shop underground work. You know, I'm like,
Yeah,
so yeah. When it comes to the art, I think Joe Mandura was the popular artist, but I think there's bound to be people like me that just Bacalo's stuff just fascinated me. I could just stare at the artwork and not give two shits about the story that's going through there, and that's ended up what happening. Like, you have to take a second to think about what you're seeing when you look at his artwork, and then it's all so clear and it's perfect. You know, Shade the Changing Man, he kind of had that effect on things. Oh man, let me get through this one right here. So this was the book where, if you're a Warren Ellis fan, and man, when I was trying to complete these books, I think I almost ended up with two complete sets of the 4-issue miniseries of Excalibur.
Excalibur.
Yeah. So I've got 3 or 4 number ones, 2 number 2s. I don't know. I got a bunch of these, right?
Yeah,
And this was the one where I was just sort of done. You know what I mean? God, so much talking, and I'm not real sure what to say about him. But this third issue finally was right. We got, first of all, Nightcrawler is calling himself Kurt Darkholm. He knows that Mystique,
Mystique's mother.
Raven Darkholm, is his mother. We get to see Destiny. We see Avalon again, and a lot of these characters. It's a lot of catching up and seeing what happened to a lot of mutants here. Now Warren Ellis still was able to inject a little bit. I think he's the one that did it to where you had the River Styx feel when Nightcrawler gets on the boat and he's talking to the monk who ends up being the Juggernaut and all this stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. If you like Warren Ellis, you're going to like this. You know what I mean? It's still got that little flair. But like I said, it just kind of goes places where this is one of those things where a lot of this is filler and unnecessary. Even though Warren Ellis
That's
is,
where I'm at. I liked it, but some of it was kind of a chore to get through.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and like I said, I ended up getting a bunch of number ones of this over the years trying to do it. The Fabian Nicieza book, it slowed me down at any point, man. The Fabian Nicieza book with Andy Kubert and things felt like an '80s book because they've got Cyclops looking like Nomad at the time when he had the backpacking baby on his back and he was riding motorcycles. He looked like a renegade, that
Yeah.
television show.
Well, did
Uh,
you notice, like in the design, that his hair was always covering one eye for a reason?
yeah,
Like I didn't notice at first, but later as you get through it, it's like, oh, someone took out his other eye.
right. Um, yeah, and this they kind of tell the story here of what happened, how Wolverine, Jean Grey was there, Wolverine and Weapon X and Scott were getting into another fight. He had two eyes, and then they just it's like they kind of jumped to the end where, by God, Cyclops was going to fight, but it cost him an eye. So not only did he lose an eye because Weapon X took it, but he shot off, Wolverine's hand at a joint or something, and of course it didn't grow back. And this takes
Which I
me
always
back.
thought was weird.
Yeah, and I don't think they really answered why not. You know what I mean? So
No, but then I want to say in that X-Men Omega, he still has his claws in that hand, which you didn't know and turned out to be a surprise
right, which
because
means
they were in his forearm.
yeah, yeah, he lost the hand, but yeah, and the claws ended up popping out. I forgot about that. Oh man, that also was the story somewhere in all of this, and it's probably X-Men Omega. There's this little line that I liked, right? And there was no internet back then that I could access, that I knew I'd heard it before, so I just assumed they ripped it off from some book. And it was a Wade. I'm pretty sure it was Mark Wade scripting, but actually it ends up, I was able to look it up years later and found out that it's like one of those wise tale comments, like from England, that nobody knows who wrote 2 or 3 years 100 years ago. But Mark Wade, or if that who's the writer was, he was really building up Cyclops really well. And he said that the one-eyed man in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed
Oh, the
man,
one-eyed man is king. Yeah,
I thought that was sheer fucking poetry when I was like 22 when this came out. I
yeah.
was
No, when
like,
I was
wow,
15, I was like, that's
wow.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I knew they'd pulled it from something, but I'm like, somebody has studied Shakespeare. You know what I'm saying? So Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't remember. Like, I knew he was stealing it from somewhere, but where he put it was absolutely perfect.
yeah, yeah. So it was in there. So Factor X actually like it did what X Factor did. It got the original band back together with their family. We got to see how we get the gray fur when the Beast ended up getting Hank McCoy got his transformation into being the hairy beast. He was gray, and this one is evil and experiments on people. He would end up coming to the real timeline of the Marvel universe, and he really caused some shit. They really used him a lot to start a lot of stuff over the years throughout the 90s. We see Jean Grey and Cyclops aren't together, but she does pop up. We have a Psycho Havoc. He's got his girlfriend, Magneto's daughter, whatever she's called in this.
And I think it was Banshee's daughter, Siren.
Yeah, something like that was in here. We get North Star and Aurora from the X Factor in here for some reason stuff, right? So this is Fabian Nasenza. This is the safe book. We get a little bit of background. If your Angel pops up when they're talking about Avalon, the brothers fight, like you said. I'm supposed to give a shit, like we have this Cain and Abel situation going on. Like I said, I kind of found this one a little bit forgettable, even though Steve Epting is really trying to draw his ass off. It's one of those deals. If I wait a minute, I think I'm remembering right. Because next we have the Amazing X-Men, and that's Andy Kubert, and maybe this was Larry Hama. I don't know. Larry Hama is involved in here somewhere. I'm just butchering all this shit, right? But the Amazing X-Men, we got Storm and Quicksilver, and this has Banshee and all of this stuff like that. I can't even tell you what happened in this one.
Yeah, it's a pretty forgettable book.
Yeah, there's a lot of Magneto in here fighting Apocalypse. We get to see a little bit more about Bishop gets tortured a little bit here and there.
Yeah, I think they
And
catch Magneto and Bishop in that book towards the end.
yeah, that's what I mean. It's the filler issue. And amazingly enough, we have the Weapon X books where it's Jean Grey, The Adventures of Jean Grey and Wolverine. And if you saw Deadpool Wolverine, I'm kind of surprised these books didn't go up where we actually got to see this version of Wolverine for half a second. But anyway, yeah, this is your romantic couple and their little melodramas going on.
I mean,
Uh,
it kind of worked for me for all the people who wanted those got two to be together in the real 616 timeline. It works here.
yeah. So, what I was getting ready to say is that if you're a Wolverine fan and a completist, I absolutely get it. You know what I mean? I'm just one of those people that never really had a desire to see Jean Grey and Wolverine together. I never believed in that little love triangle that Wolverine never really had a shot. You know what I mean? It's
I
like
agree, but I don't like Scott and Jean together either. I think she's better with Emma Frost.
wait a minute, Jean and Emma Frost as a
Excuse
couple.
me, Scott and Emma Frost.
No, by all means, we need to write your book. Like,
Yeah, it would sell well.
yeah, I think the last time I saw those two together was Grant Morrison's run of X-Men, where Cyclops was having an affair with Emma on the psychic plane, and
Yeah,
so yeah. Oh man, yeah.
but I mean that lasted well into Avengers versus X-Men, and so I mean they were together for a decade at least.
Well, hello, Jay Lucian. And then John Jones. I remember Evil Beast. They did an X-Men Unlimited issue 10 with him by Mark Waid and Ian Churchill. Yeah, that's what I mean. That gray beast.
Yeah,
Uh,
he ended up
he had some
getting
legs.
sucked out of the timeline at the end,
Yeah.
causing havoc.
Prime One Collector, Age of Apocalypse was great in the 90s. X-Men at the time was the next level character. Everyone hyped up. Yeah. I think at the time this was an exciting event in years of like glut and letdown and not knowing what was coming. I mean, uh, I don't feel like it needs to be defended, is what I'm trying to say. I think we can look back at on 2020 and realize it had its flaws and stuff, but for what it is,
It
for
was
not
enjoyable for what it was. I
yeah.
enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed collecting it. It's a bit bloated, you know.
Yeah, and then Gambit and the externals is when they go into space to get the Necron crystal. Um,
Is it
you remember?
really plausible that Gambit's holding the torch for Rogue 20 years later? Or even 10 years later, whenever they got together. But it's like, dude, find another chick already.
All
Like,
right,
she's happy.
I was there. I was there getting the X Men when Gambit appeared, right?
Me
And
too. I had his first appearance.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, they found another way to make another mutant from another part of the world with another accent.
Yeah.
You had the X-Men from all around the world, Africa and Europe and stuff. You had, people kind of forget they wrote all these characters with better accents when they first came
Yeah. That
out.
Colossus speaking to someone like Storm, and then having like Wolverine who's Canadian, and then throwing the Cajun.
Yeah,
It's a lot of
it,
different accents and words.
yet everybody understood each other without a problem. You know what I mean?
No one was offended.
So yeah, so when Gambit came out and stuff, I was like, oh, a new X-Men. It felt like it was getting a little formulaic. We were going to throw out a new character here, a new hot book, and keep this book going and things like that's what it felt like. I was 17 when Gambit came out, uh, and I do hold that the annual is the first appearance because I bought it first, knowing who's coming. Anyway, neither here nor there on that, right? But what they did is they kind of lost. I still feel like Chris Claremont, king of all the dangling plot lines, and some things still never really ended up being finished, with some plot lines that he had. But one of the plot lines that Chris Claremont was playing around with is that there was a third Summers brother. Okay. And,
Vulcan or whatever. Didn't they bring him around?
that's who it ended up being. But if you go back and look at energy based powers,
Oh, you're saying they thought it was
where,
gonna be Gambit.
yeah. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're saying Gambit was part of the Morlock massacre, even though we never
Yeah.
saw him in the
He
Morlock
was the
massacre.
traitor.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they kind of abandoned this third Summers brother that they never really mentioned before anyway. And then all of a sudden they come out with Vulcan. Gambit was supposed to be, and it was real easy for them to
I'd
find
never
out.
heard that, but I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it never went anywhere. That's where they were going with it. That's why I'm sitting here saying that's one of the reasons Gambit was such a big star and gaining popularity. They were addressing the fan service on him, but they also had plans that you felt like there was some kind of momentum going here. There was a little bit of shadiness going on with them. And it's real easy for a Summers brother to discover they're a Summers brother because Cyclops and Havoc can fight each other. Their energy based powers won't affect each other
Yeah, they just
on a
make him
genetic level.
stronger or something,
Um, I don't know if they did. That's a little bit
or
of
at
a
least one writer thought they did, or maybe
I,
I'm
yeah.
misremembering it.
Yeah. So can you imagine being out there in the field of battle and Cyclops actually gets hit with one of Gambit's cards and it does nothing to him? And he's like, hey, then they go to the danger room and they do some genetic testing and Mr. Sinister is like, I got you fuckers. Ha,
Yeah,
like you could tell where it was kind of going. You know what I mean? Chris Claremont had something in mind for where Mr. Sinister was going and where Gambit was going, and a lot of this stuff just kind of got abandoned. So there's a lot to read into there where you think it might have went, but it was definitely going somewhere. And then, like I said, somebody addressed the fact in a letters column, I think, uh, that I'm going by pure memory here. I might be misremembering all this, but I remember there's a few letters or something out there where they're like, "Hey, what happened to this third Summers brother?" And we get Vulcan. That was their answer. We'll just throw out a character that's never been seen before. That was
yeah, I
their
wasn't a fan of that storyline either. It was
yeah,
all right.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of forgettable stuff there. Claremont came back to the X-Men in around the year 2000 for a while. I don't remember what was going on.
I actually never read that run.
Yeah, Alan Davis was doing the X-Men. Claremont came in and supposedly secretly helped him out. And then all of a sudden he started writing the X-Men, and I think it kind of fizzled. That was also around the time that he was writing Justice League with John Byrne, and that was horrible. I'm like, there was nothing good coming out of
Oh,
that.
I didn't even know he wrote Justice League. I actually might check it out just to see how bad it is.
Oh, it's bad. It was nothing but a setup to bring the John Byrne's forgettable Doom Patrol book out. It was nothing but a setup to bring the Doom Patrol back. Yeah, yeah.
So it's completely
Um,
forgettable.
And what about X-Men? I never read those 4 issues of X-Men.
So X-Men, you kind of find him where he's escaped from the lab or whatever, the pens, wherever he was being experimented on, and he hooks up with Forge, and he's with like Sauron, Mastermind, and they're following this group that's going around and just doing free shows for people. It was kind of a weird book.
Right.
But they end up, I want to say, towards the end of the book. I mean, it all just leads to X-Men Omega. But yeah,
So,
even I can't think off the top of my head, and I read it within the last couple of days.
right. Yeah. So that was the thing about a lot of these books, man. They were starting to cook. They were starting to get a little momentum. You know, the first issues of each 4-issue miniseries did really, I think, really well over the most part to catch up the new reader. Here's where we're at. Here's what's going on. And then they would come in with a little bit of a plot, you know, but it was like,
Yeah,
but a lot of it was contrived, forced exposition because they were like, we have 4 issues to let you know about this part of the world and where we're going with it. So they had to do it. So for me, Age of Apocalypse, by the time they got to that 4th issue, it was like everything abruptly stopped.
yeah.
Every issue said go to X.
Everything at the end of those 4 issues said to be concluded in X-Men Omega.
Yeah. And that's what led us to more fighting, more, you know, there's some things in here that did not get addressed or finished, which works, you know, because this was an ongoing timeline. But they just blew the whole thing up to shit with nuclear bombs right when Bishop and was able to go back in time and stop Legion or whatever the fuck he did. That's what I mean. When you
Yeah, he stopped him, and then of course, oh my God, he's dead, but not really,
yeah,
because no one stays dead.
and then the very next month, besides the fact that we have an ongoing X-Man, we have Sugar Man, the Gray Beast, a few people escaping.
Yeah,
It's like business as usual. We pick up all the books where they
yep.
ended up, right? And I have a lot of those runs. I had the Warren Ellis Excalibur run. This doesn't even bother you. You know what I
Well,
mean?
at
Like,
least they didn't go to a whole bunch of new number ones and go, oh, now we're back to an even different new reality. At least it's like, all right, we're back in Earth 616.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So, yeah, it's like it just never happened. It almost felt a little, now that I'm talking to you, it's kind of like having the psycho pirate be the only one to remember Crisis in the pre-Crisis world.
Yeah,
You know, I
good
think
reference.
Next Man retained that knowledge. Anybody escaped. Blink was back. They introduced Morph in Age of Apocalypse because of the cartoon. I'm remembering
Yeah.
that now. I can't remember if Morph. I don't think Morph came into the regular 616.
I don't know if he was in the Exiles or not either. He might have just
Oh, he was in
died.
the Exiles.
He was
Yeah,
in the Exiles?
yeah. I have the almost I had the almost the entire run of Exiles. The Judd Winnick issues are the best. I don't have the Chuck Austin books. And then I got the stuff after that. I
I
got
gotta
almost
go
all,
read those.
I've got almost all the issues except for the Chuck Austin books and in the '90s when Claremont came on.
I
But
heard the
anyway,
Chuck Austin books were not that great.
yeah. Now, well, Chuck Austin. After reading Tom King, I can be real forgiving of Chuck Austin's writing. But anyway, yeah, you know, I can forgive the guy now. Um, but Age of Apocalypse is like what I said. I feel like it should have a bigger cult following. You know what I mean? I feel like that all these writers, all these moving pieces, all these artists, all these designs went to waste. You know, because they created an entire universe. And as I commented before we came on the show, they did more work on this than what DC did when they launched the 52 in planning and deciding what characters, what to do with everybody and the character designs and stuff. That's one of the reasons the DC 52 failed. They were just like, we're doing this in a couple months, go. You know, everybody do
Yeah.
what you want and we'll tell you what to do later. Meanwhile, these guys get together while they're doing ongoing books. They come up with this whole timeline, this whole world, this whole universe. We're talking space and politics of America and what's going on in Europe and these human high councils. And they even decided what heroes died, you know, 10 years ago before they become heroes. You know, I mean, that's quite a feat. To have this thing last 4 or 5 months, I think that's a complete waste. I, what do you think? I mean, I'm just talking away,
I
man.
mean, all that stuff I think is why 30 years later we're still talking about it and it's still memorable. It
Right.
works because of all the different things they did and how well crafted the story was, the
Yeah.
decisions made. Like when they made a decision, they committed to it. Whereas when you talk about that DC relaunch, dude, they said they were going to commit to decisions and then they never did. And it's like all the old stuff happened too. And you're like, why do I even care?
Right. Yeah. And in this one, they had a lot of drama. They
Oh
had a
my God.
lot
Yeah.
of
There was drama in every issue almost.
yeah. they had that huge drama. They were trying to be Claremont there with a lot of the drama between Cyclops and his brothers and his
Age of
brother.
Apocalypse is not low stakes.
Right. Yeah. And then like I said, you had the drama between Kitty Pryde and Colossus and all that stuff. And then you had everybody like, it's the Sugar Man. Tell me he's not here. For some reason, the Sugar Man really scared the hell out of some people that were there. So that's what I mean. There was a lot of emotion that were there. They
Well, there
just
was, I remember so many questions, like with what was Apocalypse's son's name again?
oh
Uh,
my god, I just went blank as soon I was about to say it.
Onslaught, or no, it wasn't. He was
Holocaust.
Nemesis and then Holocaust. It
Yeah,
was Holocaust. And in one of the issues as Nemesis in that X Chronicles #1, he kills the Scarlet Witch. And Rogue's there, and she's like, "Please take care of Eric." Blah blah blah. It adds to the lore. But when you see Nemesis again, like you thought he was dead or whatever, he's now a Holocaust, and they never explain how they genetically mutated him, or even really what his powers were.
yeah, yeah.
So, like,
And
you always had these questions, and like you said earlier, it has been speculated that we had seen this person before in the 616 before he
yeah,
became Holocaust. So, but that was one of those questions they never really answered.
and the thing that got me, I'm just going to put it out there, and this could have been something I missed. You know what I mean? But okay, Apocalypse took over the world. What the hell did he want? All he did was like section off pieces of America, let some other people run it. And everybody was doing genetic experiments, and he's walking around in a cape. What did he
Yeah, I
want?
mean,
What did he
they
want?
don't really make his plans really well known. He's just talking about survival of the fittest. I'm the best. I'm gonna punch you, Magneto. What you gonna do about it? It
Yeah.
was a bunch of shit talking by Apocalypse.
I remember there was somewhere in the pins where they found out Mr. Sinister was still doing some kind of genetic experiments. And they were like, we told the Human High Council we were not going to do that anymore. Well, I'm like, well, surprise, his name is Mr. Sinister. I'm like,
Yeah,
you know, there's still genetic. What where are they going with this? What are they wanting to do? Is it just torture? That's what I mean. There was a
that's
lot of
what it seemed
motivation.
like. It's just, oh, the evil guy won, and here's all the evil stuff he's doing.
Right. Yeah. So as much fun as it is and stuff like that, there was still a lot of stuff that they could have, the places they could have went. And some of the places I think they could have went is what we're bringing up now. Why? What there was not a lot of why answered. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Although I did like how Magneto did take care of Apocalypse at the end. The double page spread was absolutely phenomenal. I was not expecting that as a kid. Like you turn the page, you're like, what?
Do you remember what he did? Do you want to
Oh
tell
yeah,
everybody?
he did. He ripped him in half, like with magnetism. Which, yeah, I didn't think he could do that. I didn't. But damn, he did.
It's in continuity that he can mess with the iron in people's blood, and I don't think that's how iron works with magnetism. That's all I'm saying. I'm
Who
like,
even knows if it works with Apocalypse? Like, no one's really done his DNA or
yeah,
knows his physiology. Like,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah. And I got to tell you, what they did do in this, if you want to like compare Apocalypse, or whatever, they did a better job with him in Age of Apocalypse than they did in the Apocalypse X-Men movie.
Oh yeah, no, I totally 100% agree.
So I mean, this is not the worst version of Apocalypse. I just think he looks like a gigantic cartoon character, and I could not take him serious. You know what I
Uh,
mean?
to me, I like the fact that he's a giant cartoon character in this.
Yeah,
It works for me.
I
He's
want to
walking
see.
around with cape.
I want to see Abin Sur. I don't want to see the caped, sleek designed Apocalypse. I just with the line across his lips and stuff. I don't know. I want somebody that's like a mummy and old and ancient and stuff, right? Oh my goodness. Okay, Age of Apocalypse was a great time in the 90s. X-Men at the time was the next level character everyone hyped up.
That is true. Everyone was talking about X-Man, like when that was coming out. You'd have those stupid arguments like, "There's no one called X-Man." They're like, "No, I'm talking about Nate Gray from the Age of Apocalypse." And then they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, there is an X-Man."
I got the Ladron issues of Cable. Took me a little while to get them all. And of course, after I get them all, I start finding them left and right in dollar boxes after all that work.
How it works.
But the thing about it is that X-Men books, at least in this area, you're not going to find a whole lot of them. You're not going to find the first 4 issues that are part of Age of Apocalypse. They're not FOMO books. They're not worth a lot of money. But the reason I started looking and started noticing this is because there's an issue, there's a storyline in Cable that crosses over with two or three issues of X-Man. And I'm like, yeah, I'll follow, no problem. I'll find them. Can't find them
I'll have
anywhere.
to pull out the long box and see if even I have them. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't checked in years, so they
Well,
could
I
be
mean,
in.
the books aren't worth anything, but you don't find them. I never see anybody pulling out their hauls either to talk about them here.
Yeah,
Uh,
I noticed that too.
oh yeah, the Prime One Collector, the panel where Black Adam pushed Psycho Pirate's eyes with his fingers through his mask in Final Crisis. That was some. Was that Psycho? Was that Black Adam or was that Superboy Prime? It was Black Adam. He's right. Yeah, I'm sure. And then Walt Simonson portrayed Apocalypse as having a very fluid shape while using his powers, like Proteus and Plastic Man mixed into one. There we go. So the
Yeah,
design is the exact opposite of Walt Simonson. That's exactly right, Paolo. Very good. I love that. That's a very good observation and have. Right. He was a shapeshifter, and it
yeah.
looked like he shapeshifted into a cartoon to me. Oh man. So Pond, do you have anything that I ripped I ripped through some of that, you ripped through some of that. You're popping out moments here and there. What part of the Age of Apocalypse do you think we ought to like cover, or your favorite part, or whatever you have to say about it?
Uh, I'm. So, do you remember the Madri? There was like this terrorist group or whatever, and then in I want to say it's X Men Omega, you find out that they're all just Jamie Madrox duplicates.
Kind of,
And
yeah.
I was like, oh my god, that's so crazy, you know? And it's like we now have to kill Jamie Madrox to fucking help save the day, you know? So like all the little dilemmas and all the horrible things they had to do to get to where they needed to be, you know?
See,
It was interesting.
See, and that's just it. There's no way to sit here and really cover in one video everything that went through here, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's ridiculous to even read this thing in order almost. You
yeah,
know, you can read it in a couple different orders and get it like a similar yet different story.
yeah. So, despite it being a time travel trope, besides the plot being what it is, overall, besides the a bunch of whys not being there, the one thing it is not is predictable. You know what I
No.
mean? So, like you said, when you had your Jamie Madrix part, the multiple man pop up in there, you didn't see it coming. That's the whole deal.
Yeah.
There was, and that wasn't from lazy writing and not laying out clues and stuff like that. No, as a reader, there's something freaking going on in every issue, which is what a comic book is supposed to do.
Like
Uh,
they had started laying conversations about why Cyclops didn't have his eye. But you
yeah,
didn't get the full story until I think it was Factor X4 or whatever, when they're all
yeah,
together and they're talking about it, and you're like, oh yeah, he
and they
did
don't
blow his
show
hand off while taking out his eye or whatever.
they don't show him actually losing the eye. They don't show that.
No,
No, that's just it. There was that's why I'm saying there was little things that were a little bit too safe. But then again, they're this is an event they're trying to make some money with. You know what I mean? So they had to be safe. But that's what I'm trying to say. A lot of cool concepts, a lot of cool ways to go. They did fit in some character driven stuff. This thing just would have been the only way to really improve it is to let it space out with timing. And you got to be very forgiving that they only had 4 months to tell all these stories. They gave you too much story, which is so much better than not enough. You know what I mean? Um, I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. I can both pick this thing apart, but at the same time, I'm impressed with
yeah, I
everything they
can
did.
love it,
Yeah.
but I could also pick it apart. But to me, at the end of the day, it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable
Yeah.
reading it. It was fun going back and reading it all again. I think it's one of the best X-Men stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also one of the reasons why I stopped reading comics for a while and collecting. You
Yeah.
know, so like it's all over the place in forms of like entertainment value.
Well, like I said, there's about 3 years there where the X-Men are pathetic. I'm just saying it. I'm just calling it out. They were doing things.
92 to 94.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you get this big shot in the arm, and this thing is of its era. I mean, this is 1995. We were there, and
Oh
this is
yeah.
yeah. I mean, like I said, the first real page of the story actually starting of the Age of Apocalypse takes place in Seattle. I mean, as soon as I opened it and started my reread, I just put it down and started laughing. Like that is so fucking 90s.
Yeah. I mean, I used to get. I guarantee you, I bought some of these off the spinner rack.
Oh yeah, yeah. I checked out. Mine was the dollar bin. That's just who I am. I was the guy that 9 times out of 10, almost every. This is during that 10 years. I rarely, if any, would touch my paycheck getting comics. I was trading in books, flipping books. I would. You just had to wait a month or two, and they would go ahead and already be in the dollar bins in some places.
Yeah,
You know, killing Jamie Madrix helped save the day in any occasion. If he went in time to the Aztec Empire, duplicative could have been sacrificed every day. Yeah, when I read these things, they're that small. Killing Jamie Madrix helps save the day in any occasion. He's being funny. If he went to the Aztec Empire, a duplicate of his could be sacrificed every day. You know what? Paolo just wrote the best Jamie Madrix story ever, right there. You know what I mean? You know, that sounds like something that would have been an Invincible more than the Marvel Universe. Liking today's show. Hey, Dave McKenzie, what's up, brother? Liking today's show, Howler. Those early mutant crossovers were some of my favorite experiences. Mutant Massacre took my collecting to the next level. Mutant
I
Massacre,
totally agree. Beauty Massacre was phenomenal.
yeah, I keep that handy. I still have all the issues I bought off the rack, and I whip this bad boy out every now and then just so I can read all the way through the thing. Um,
Yeah, it's in the omnibus, but I bought it like I had the single issues, and then I bought the original oversized hardcover, and then I bought the omnibus. So
yeah, Yeah, and I've heard people tell me over the years that's where they stopped collecting X-Men. That's where it went different. I'm reading some epic collections and been reading some things pre 86 and 85, and I totally get it. They're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. That is really the X-Men really went in such a different direction. And I got to say, after some of the stuff I've been reading with the Brood saga and stuff, some Claremont's writing in 82 and 83 is very jarring. So it was an improvement by no,
there's
yeah,
definitely some filler in there.
yeah. So, but man, what else you got there, brother, about PonAdidas? I mean, with your PonAdidas when it comes to Age of Apocalypse,
Hmm.
I'm putting you on the
Well,
spot. I've pretty much said almost everything I want about it, but I'm going to sit here and end up thinking about 5, 6 things I should have
yeah,
brought up.
it's one of those things where I don't know if I'll think about something later, but I mean, I've always remembered it fondly. Like when this was reprinted the first time, I bought it the day of.
Oh,
Like
nice.
yeah, so like I was excited 20 years later because that book's probably 11 years old, 12 years old,
Uh-huh.
and I was excited to read it again, and I wasn't disappointed.
I
So
tell you, I tell you what, I would like to have seen now that we're having 2020 hindsight. I talked about how this was around the time that they got rid of editor in chief and they put certain titles under an umbrella under one editor and did their own little thing. I kind of think maybe this would have been a very good opportunity just to take the mutants out of the Marvel universe and go ahead and let this be the books, the universe. They could have
you're
slowed.
saying that's it? Take all, stop
Have,
everything for 4 months or whatever it is, and just be like, everyone's reading this.
yeah, just make Age of Apocalypse the mutant books. Just, I mean, that's a hot take, I know, but I mean that would have saved a lot of pain. Like I think with what came with the X-Men over the years and stuff, where they went with it, because they ended up dissolving the X-Men anyway. They merged thanks to the movies and movie rights and a lot of other stuff that was going on. They ended up like merging them with the Avengers for a while. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of things that they've done over the years to the X-Men to where having them be in their own universe and keep Age of Apocalypse going. I mean, they could have defeated Apocalypse and we could have seen them rebuilding the world in the mutant image or something. You see what I'm
Oh,
saying?
that might have been cool.
That's what I'm getting at. There's so many ways they could have went, but the reason I'm saying that is because I keep going back and harping like a broke record. I can't believe the foundation they've set down here for this for something that was just a 4 month crossover event that was
Do you
going to
think they
be.
could have kept the whole thing going? Like, had
That's
the
what
bombs not went off at the end, and they were just like, "All right, we're gonna have more Age of Apocalypse stories set here, and we're just gonna keep going on for a
this
while."
is it. Yeah, we this is a Marvel universe that's going. They sort of did it with Mutant X with Havoc,
Okay.
and that lasted 25 issues. That was a different dimension or something, and in that dimension, they took the X-Men that were at their worst. You had the vampire Storm. You had Beast who kept experimenting on himself and he was part amphibian now, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And Havoc was from the universe, right? They already had books that were sort of doing things like that. You follow me?
Right.
Um, I kind of think I would have been with the way things went. We didn't know they were going to happen at the time, but the way things went, and like I said, by 2000, I don't know when they did it, 2000, between 2010 and 13, we had the Uncanny Avengers, and then
Yeah.
we had the Gala years, that we just came out of, where they keep rebooting the X Men, and those reboots mean nothing because it's time they're
Nothing.
announcing the next reboot, and then they're doing the Gala issues, and didn't they have like? Didn't somebody? I saw some video a couple years ago where they were living on the moon, and Wolverine, Storm, and Cyclops were all in a relationship together.
I heard that. Like, I stopped reading right around with Bendis, with Uncanny X-Men and all that. So, like, once it got into Powers of X, I stopped reading right before that.
Yeah.
But I
So
mean, good.
no, I'm just saying what's worse, having them be in this foundation of this work of Age of Apocalypse and have all the mutants just be doing their thing, or what Marvel ended up doing over the next couple of decades with them.
That might be a coin flip.
Oh man, there's characters I absolutely hated that came out of the X-Men. Marrow, I couldn't stand Marrow. That was so stupid. She grew, her bones would grow out of her body, and she would break them off and try to use them as clubs. I'm not
Oh my
scared.
god.
Yeah, and then you had Worm, and somebody must have been a Doctor Octopus Hellraiser fan, because Worm just had, his whole thing was he just had these two maggots that lived in his body, would go out, and they reminded me of Beastmaster and his two weasels. You
This is
know,
what happens when you don't pay your writers. You know what I'm saying? Like, Marvel used to be the house of ideas. Now nobody reads them.
right. I came up with Paolo came up with four different universes: X World for the mutants, Edge from the street level, low tech, Spider Man. Yeah, yeah. Um, and that's actually kind of what they did at Marvel a little bit there. Midnight Suns for the occult, and Marvel for high adventure. Yeah, this is actually kind of what Marvel did back in the day when they, um, you know, the suits came down and split up all the editorial. That's kind of what they did. And when did Midnight Suns come out? Because that was I was there. That
Early
was,
90s, I want
yeah,
to say.
another speculation market cash
Yeah.
grab that led to the bubble busting. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, Pon, what did you think? Was that an all right show? Did you?
Oh yeah, dude. I've been watching you for years, so it was nice just to be a guest and be able to come on who can talk comics intelligently and has an opinion. And there's no stupid culture war nonsense. You know, we can just sit here and talk about something we liked or disliked.
Right on, man. Well, you won't have to come on again, okay? So you got an open invitation, man. Just think about it, and you got a topic or something at any point, let me know, man, and we can do this again. I think I'm gonna hopefully crossing my fingers. I'll be healthy enough not to keep putting it off. Um, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, definitely. Like, depending on the topic, Sunday is my free day, so if you ever do a show, and depending on if the topic's interesting or it's something I'm knowledgeable in, I would absolutely come back on and talk.
Every other weekend is when I have wiggle room to plan stuff. So yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like to thank everybody that popped in here, all the great
Yeah,
comments.
thanks for everybody for watching.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, man. Everybody that hung in there through the whole show, I appreciate you guys. It's got
Sorry
nice.
we were all over the place, but Age of Apocalypse is an event where you're all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. Age of Apocalypse is something definitely worth checking out any way you can. There's tons of videos where they do the storytelling thing, so you can actually follow more than what we did here today. But I like what we did today. I've got no problem with it.
Me too. Yeah, I think it went great.
I think we have a take that nobody else has done or even attempted on YouTube with this.
Oh, good, because I don't want to be like everybody else when it comes to reviews or conversations.
Okay. Well, everybody check out PonAdidas' channel there, and make sure you follow him on any social media he has. He doesn't want to plug anything, too hard. What's the best social media to find you on?
If you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, it's PonAdidas. If you want to find me on Instagram, it's PonAdidas with a Z. And if you want to find me on Facebook, Matt Columbus.
All right. And with that, guys, y'all have be excellent to each other. Read your comics, check it out. And if you're watching the future, definitely leave some comments there. And yeah, later, guys.
All right. See you later. Thanks for having me on.
All right, hold on.